Thank you for your welcome and good morning to you. This is the first time that I've actually been asked to speak about pornography in a church service. Okay, I get to talk about it lots. I've talked about it on radio, but to actually be in a church service is quite unique. And the first part of the message is going to give you some history and some background stuff. And for some of you, it's not going to feel like much hope. But it's important to understand the insidious nature of what we're facing and where it's come from. And then we're going to talk a bit about hope and freedom and transformation. It has to be in that context. Just last month, the founder of Playboy, Hugh Hefner, died, aged 91. If you followed the media and social media, this is the sort of things that were said about him. Many in the press are hailing Hugh Hefner as a pioneer in his day, a champion of abortion rights and breaking the shackles on oppressive sexual culture. The Twitter from Playboy said he was an American icon. His wife, Christy Harris, 60 years his junior, 31 years of age, she said he was an American hero and a pioneer. Wow. When I read that stuff, I thought, really? A pioneer? Let me tell you, he was a pioneer for hedonism and narcissism. And he might have died a very wealthy man in our standards, but in the eternal perspective, he died a very tragically poor man. 5 partners during his lifetime, 3 wives, 4 children. 2 of his children in their 60s, 2 of his children in their mid-20s. And he's supposedly an icon. And some of you younger people won't know about him other than you'll see the Playboy picture. And Playboy's broken into 2 companies. So you have Playboy Entertainment, which is the pornography side, and then you have Playboy Marketing, which is like the stickers that go on cars or the pencil cases with the rabbit on it. And we think, what a cute little rabbit. The little rabbit represents this dirty old man who married someone 60 years younger than him. That could be his great-granddaughter almost, couldn't it? When I was a boy, pornography wasn't as a big deal. And I've got to be really upfront here, pornography has never been an issue for me. But in my counselling work, I've worked with, in the last 25 years, many Christians struggling with porn addiction. I was asked once if porn wasn't going to be my vice, what would be my vice? And I said, probably alcoholism. Growing up Lutheran, best winemakers in the world. My mum's a Mackenzie, they're Scottish, they make the best whiskey in the world. I have to be very careful about my vice. As a boy, if I was going to access pornography, I'd have to go down to the local store. My local store was the Mini Street Shop. And if I wanted to go, I'd have to go to the shopkeeper and say, can I have a copy of the magazine that's under the counter? And he would have said, go home, Janetzki, and I'm telling your mother. So the only way that I could actually come across pornography is if I came across somebody who found his dad's stash or his older brother's stash, or I'd go to the school library and look at National Geographic, because that was the extent of it. But the world's not like that. The biggest access point for pornography in the world today is our smartphone. In developing parts of the world, they mightn't have electricity, but they have a smartphone. And pornography is one of the leading causes for slavery in Australia, in the world I should say, not Australia, is sexual trafficking of young people. And in some of those developing countries, they're acutely aware between the connection between technology, pornography, and the loss of young people. The difference is that when I was a kid, if I wanted to find pornography, I had to look for it. Today, pornography finds us. Pornography is on the hunt for us. And Professor Gail Dines, who's the world leading in the research of this field for 30 years, she says the pornographers are not apologetic about this. Their target age for first exposure to porn are particularly boys aged 10. And it's an insidious industry. So those who understand technology is that they hire people who do string searches. So when you go to Google and type in, that becomes a string search. So then, for example, they'll have every incorrect spelling of Pokemon take you to a porno site. This is a brutal industry. More on that in a moment. So let me tell you a bit about the history. So in 1895, we had the development of motion pictures. Within 1 year of the development of motion pictures, that media was used to produce pornography. There's been a correlation throughout history with the development of technology and the proliferation of porn. In 1953, Hefner started Playboy, and you can see the figures up there, the circulation. It peaked at around 5.6 million per month. And then in 65, Penthouse came out, and Penthouse said that, you know, Playboy was too tame. And it wasn't until 1969 on the big screen that we actually saw the first mainstream movie representing a swinger's life called Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. And the first full frontal nude didn't happen until 1971. So if you go from 53 to 71, that's rather slow progression because we're dealing with print media as it emerges into technological media. And then in 74, we had Hustler, Larry Flint came out with. In 1984, we had the domain name system, which is actually the foundation of the web, the internet. And in 92, we had the term surfing the net. And it was estimated in that time that people buying their own home computer, that 1 out of every 3 computers being purchased was specifically for accessing pornography. In 2005, we had the launch of YouTube. Then we actually had YouPorn launches, which is like a YouTube for porn. Then in 2006, Google were ordered to supply information to the US government, and to this date they have not complied with that order in pertaining to access of pornography. And then in 2007, 10 years ago, was Pornhub. With the development of YouPorn and Pornhub, is that the pornography companies saw a decline in some of their sales because people were doing their own homemade porn and posting it. Let's put this into figures of consumption. So 53 initially started with Playboy with 75,000 subscribers. In 73, Penthouse had 4 million. Hustler in 74 had 3 million. Playboy in 75 popped up to 5.6 million. Hustler dropped. Playboy and Penthouse dropped until the very last issue of Playboy Entertainment magazines, which was in 2015, and it actually sold just under 90 billion copies in print media. Now, I made a point of the progression from the start of Playboy in print media. Technology is a very different animal. When we want to look at pornography through technology, and porn companies are leaders in technology. It's my understanding that flash files, and if you actually watch a video on your phone, it's probably been a flash file. Flash files were produced by pornographers as a way of providing content over the internet to consumers. That's the language they use. So what happens is in 2006, 58 million monthly visitors to adult sites, 167 million total US internet users. So we see between 2009 and 2010 it kicks up, but about 13% of web users were doing adult searches. Then no FAP, it's a slang American term for masturbation, saying no masturbation, started, and they got a response of just under 40 billion people hitting their site. TED Talks talked about porn in the brain. You can see the numbers there. Then US Mobile phone ownership exceeds 50%, and there's actually 63.2 billion people accessing pornography through their phone. Revenge laws come out, so around that the numbers still increase, and then we had Playboy with their last one in there, and by 2016 there's 107 million monthly users in the US to adult sites. It's a lot of people, isn't it? So let me break this down a little bit easier. In 1955 to today, so what happened was when Hefner started Playboy, he made what was considered soft porn mainstream, readily available to the masses. That is what we would call now popular porn. You only have to watch video hits and you're seeing the same degree of what Hefner produced in '53. So what's happened is that this progression from what was considered pornographic adult content is now adolescent content just by watching video hits or video clips. So the question is, what came behind that? Well, hardcore porn, which was right back unacceptable behind Playboy, has now become mainstream. And the pornographers are saying, how can we make more money? And so then they developed this thing called gonzo porn. And gonzo porn is not about people, it's about anatomy. And just focusing the frame on anatomy. And the harder and the more violent the sex is, the more it sells. And under gonzo porn we have group sex, same homosexual porn, we have rape sex, we have a whole heap of really disgusting things. Also comes under that is PTHC. Now LimeWire, which is no longer in existence, was a music website that most adolescents would have used. It was a download site. Well, most people didn't know that it was a front for a porno company. In fact, there are many fronts for porno companies. A lot of dating agencies are sometimes fronts for porno companies. And if you knew where to look, you could actually get onto pornography. And I had a young guy come and see me who got exposed to pornography at age 14. It became addictive for him. And on his weekends, he'd sit back through LimeWire, watch a bit of porn. And one day he clicked on PTHC. He was a regular user. He didn't know what it was. It actually stands for pre-teen hardcore, AKA child pornography. He actually had a knock on the door a couple of weeks later after looking at that stuff. He was repulsed by it. He had 2 children of his own, and he was so frustrated he broke the screen on his laptop and put it in the laundry. But a few weeks later, the federal police knocked on his door and charged him with child pornography charges. He came to see me to talk about what could he do to actually break the cycle of this in his life. There's an infographic, and we can easily make the PowerPoint slides available for if you want to, but just on the infographic, you may not see it just there, but down here, the highest day for consumption of porn is Sundays. Isn't that interesting? This is big business. Porn companies are not interested in improving our sex lives or our relationships. Porn companies are not even interested in promoting respect. Porn companies are interested in one thing: money. That's all they're interested in. Just to put this into context for you. In 2013, traffic to porn sites received more traffic than Netflix, Amazon and Twitter combined. Put this into another perspective. Every second, over $3,000 is being spent on pornography. Sure, you can get free porn, but the way porn works is that you actually have got to hit more, so then they actually, the good stuff that's going to really get you going, supposedly, is what you've got to pay for. The stuff that is really sick. And of 2006, which is the most recent stats that we've had on terms of numbers of things, but there were 4.2 million pornographic websites with 420 million pages. It's a lot of content, isn't it? I said we'd start with no hope. Melinda Tankard-Reist, a colleague of mine, co-edited a book called Big Porn Inc. here in Australia. She says this: young boys are being exposed to hardcore, violent pornography before they even hold hands or kiss a girl. 70% of boys have viewed adult content by the time they're 12 years old. And by the time they're 15, it's pretty hard to find any boy who hasn't viewed it. Now, not all of them are pursuing it, but they've been exposed to it. And one of the problems is it only takes one kid to have porn on his phone, and then he can Bluetooth it, beam it. If he's got a Samsung phone, put it back to back and share it. So you might have everything in your home under control, but you can't control the rest of the world. That's how insidious this is. Even girls are exposed to pornography at increasingly higher rates, with around half of them having viewed pornography by 12 and 97% by 16. That's Australian stats. Judy Putt, General Manager of Research, says this in terms of an article in the Australian Institute of Criminology: the probability that a young person will have exposure to pornography prior to the age of 18, which happens to be the legal age in Australia, is very high. Young people cite their peers as their principal source of sexual information. Peers are central how do the concepts portrayed in the media become incorporated into the performance of gender identities. So it's illegal to access pornography under 18, but we've got companies that are targeting 10-year-olds. Isn't that amazing? And I sat in Canberra in 2001, I think it was, at the Sexual Integrity Forum, and I heard an IT guy talk about that filtering at a national level was possible back then. The problem is government is not doing filtering because there's too much money involved around from companies. The only country that now has implemented filtering has been Britain. So now in Britain, there's a national filtering system that there's no access to adult content. You have to opt in. And it's interesting because the take-up rates are not that big, because mostly mums and dads say, I want my child protected from this. So this leads to the question, what impact is it having on us? What's the unexpected impact? Because isn't pornography just part of being a male? Aren't all boys doing it? Isn't that the stuff we get told? You go to the mechanic's workshop and there's the girly magazine. Isn't that just normal? Well, I disagree. I don't think it is. If we're going to have purity, if we're going to be respectful, then why should I objectify anybody, particularly our daughters, our wives, our sisters? Why should they be reduced to just a commodity for someone's gratification? To me, that sounds the opposite of respect. So what's the impact on our children? Here's an article, Sunday Mail, 19th of October 2011. Okay, it was page 7. Kids branded for life, lewd texts lead to sex crimes list. In this little section highlighted there, it says this: in the past 3 years, more than 450 child pornography charges have been laid against 10 to 17-year-olds in Queensland. Once we give a phone that can take a picture, is that anyone under the age of 18 who takes a nudie picture of themselves and sends it to somebody, they have actually just broken child pornography laws. And if they're 10 or older, they can be prosecuted. Are we talking to our kids about this? Most of us wouldn't even know. This is more dangerous than a driver's license. Why? Because once I post something in the cyber world, I lose total control over it. So for you young people, let me just give you a little, what I call the PJ test. If you're going to share something on the internet, a picture or information, blow it up full size and stick it in the playground at school. And if it's okay there, it's okay on the internet, because less people will see it at your school than they will on the internet. How's that for a test? Simple. And what happens is that when you post something on the internet, you lose total control of it because people can take a screenshot of it and repost it. And you might take it down, but you've lost control of it. What's happening to our kids is, with all the exposure to pornography, violence and crime content, are we surprised by the newly released Australian Bureau statistic figures showing that sexual assaults and related offences committed by school-aged children have almost quadrupled in 4 years? They leapt from 450 to 1,709. Unfortunately, our girls suffer greatly because of porn. This is an exact quote from Gail Dine's book, one of the scariest books I've ever read. I've got a pretty hardened stomach to this field, but when I read Gail's book, I have to put it down sometimes and stop reading because I can't just tolerate it. Women are much more understanding and aware of their true purpose in life than ever before. That purpose, of course, is to be receptacles of love. In other words, that's what porn companies say about our girls. And in interviews with supposed ex-porn stars, is that you'll only find out about the glamorous ones who have got a long career. The average young woman going into the porn industry, and this is a terrible term, it is so disrespectful, but this is the term, has a shelf life of 6 months. Because after 6 months, they're either diseased or so into drugs and alcohol that they can't function. It's disgusting, it's terrible. I do this simple thing with some high school students about workplace health and safety, of which the porn companies are exempt. And for one porn star who gets HIV on the job, the companies don't pay anything. We, the taxpayers, will pay $500,000 for their medication for the rest of their life. The porn companies pay zip. Paris Hilton, in the movie called Minor League Celebrity, 2004, Rick Salmon, her boyfriend, who was 14 years older than her, filmed them having sex, supposedly for his own use. He actually sold it on as a B-grade porno movie, and Paris, as a result, has become one of the most photographed women in the world. And this is what Gail Dine says: Hilton gets away with being anointed as a slut because she is fabulously rich. The wealth acts as a kind of upmarket cleansing cream that instantly rubs off the dirt. For most girls and women, however, especially those from working class, the dirt sticks like mud. And what the porn industry is hold up like the Paris Hiltons and go, see, you can be a glamour queen too, but they actually don't tell the real story of what it's doing to the average girl. Gail Dine's research in American universities is showing that there's a culture of hookup sex. And so hookup sex says there's no relationship or intimacy or connection. It also says what men want, and what most men learn what they want if they're viewing porn, is that they want porn sex. And porn sex has got nothing to do with love, respect, commitment, loyalty, tenderness, all the things that go to a loving relationship. Porn sex is not about that. So therefore what a man wants is what a woman wants. And it's interesting when I deal with couples where there's been porn addiction, is that the woman is grossed out by it and the guy's going, but she's supposed to like it. All the women on the porn like it. It's actually changing how we perceive and think. Male attention is about worth and identity. One of the things that distresses me as an equity feminist, there's lots of types of feminism, is that it seems to be that the most modern aspect of feminism, that is that a young woman's power is her sexuality. The early feminists didn't fight for that. There's mental health issues that come as a result of that. There's the erosion of self-concept, and in the hookup culture, there's lots of self-destructive behaviours and there's high levels of sexual assault happening. There's a direct parallel between conditions like eating disorders and the hookup sex culture. Gail Dine says, by inundating girls and women with the message that their most worthy attribute is their sexual hotness and crowding out other messages, pop culture is grooming them just like an individual perpetrator would. It's slowly chipping away at their self-esteem, stripping them of a sense of themselves as a whole human beings and providing them with an identity that emphasises sex and de-emphasises other human attributes. And we see girls as young as 6 talking about being hot or being fat. How do 6 and 8-year-old girls get that notion? From popular culture, which is just infiltrating by pornography. But it's also affecting our boys. John Mayer was interviewed, musician, was interviewed in Playboy story, and in Playboy it said, masturbation is for you as good as sex to John Mayer? And Mayer said this, absolutely, because during sex I'm just going to run a film strip. I'm still masturbating, that's what you do when you're 30 or 31 or 32. This is my problem now. Rather than meet somebody new, I'd rather go home and replay the amazing experiences I've already had. Mayer confessed to viewing up to 350 pornographic images before he got out of bed every day. But he's a popular celebrity who has the ear of young people. And as a sideline to this is prior to technology porn, the rates of what we would call erectile dysfunction, men who couldn't raise it for sex, was about 3 to 5% of the population under the age of 40. Post-technology porn, we now have a new condition called porn-related erectile dysfunction, and that figure's gone from 3 to 5%, that 30% of men under 40 have erectile dysfunction, directly related to porn. Why? Why? Because how it affects our brain. Dr. Helen Fisher is one of the world's leading researchers on love in relationships. And so she actually looked at what neurochemicals are connected to different types of love. She had 3 types of love: lust, romantic love, and attachment love. This is straight from her research. She said lust is the craving for sexual gratification, known as biological horniness. She said romantic love is infatuation with a particular person. That's when you fall in love and you think they are just the best thing since sliced bread. They're just perfect and you dream about them and you just imagine being with them all the time. And then she said attachment love is a calm, secure union with long-term partners, including pair bonding, monogamy, parenthood and kinship. That's what we would call marriage, wouldn't we? Traditional marriage. What she found was this, is that lust and romantic love produce really powerful chemicals. So testosterone, estrogen in both men and women, dopamine and norepinephrine, and serotonin. Serotonin is a chemical that makes us feel blissful, the world's good. Testosterone, particularly in boys, gives them a rush. So you know those when boys are little and they want to wrestle each other? It's because they're releasing testosterone and dopamine. They get high out of it, until someone gets hurt, of course. Now, what happens is these chemicals are very powerful chemicals that give pleasure to high levels, but they're short-lived. And there's an interplay between the first group and the second group, and they bounce off each other. And what we know from the research is that those chemicals, is that when a boy meets a girl and fall in love, those chemicals last from 18 months to 2 years. And then they dissipate. And what we have in our culture is the number one relationship type in our culture is serial monogamy. Boy meets girl, fall in love, have all these chemicals. Once the chemicals dissipate, which they're supposed to do, I don't love you anymore, I've got to go find someone else who fires off those chemicals. But they're not consciously aware of that. That's why we go. So the average length of relationship's about 3 to 5 years because we're addicted to these chemicals. Hence we have porn addiction, sex addiction, relationships addictions. We have a whole range of them. Now, the really good, well, let me say what happens here. For the porn user, they watch it, they get a massive hit. But then it gets desensitized, so then they've got to use more porn or harder porn to get the same kick. So the addiction is we become addicted to our own body chemistry. And dopamine, which fires off pleasure, is one of the most interesting neurochemicals we've got because dopamine is non-directional. So what do we mean? It goes in the direction you feed it. So if you do porn, dopamine says, do it again. That's why it explains, you know, when boys do some really dumb stuff and they get a buzz out of it, and you say, think about it before you do it, because dopamine says, do it again. Now, but you can use dopamine for the good thing, because if you're doing something that's really good and healthy for you, dopamine says, do that again. But dopamine's not smart. Now, once all those chemicals fade away and you're in a committed relationship, is that you actually get oxytocin and vasopressin. And I've got to tell you, I love oxytocin, okay? Oxytocin is the cuddle drug. So let me give you the best example. When a woman is pregnant and she gives birth, she's flooded with oxytocin. When she breastfeeds, she's flooded with oxytocin. Look at a breastfeeding mum. She's feeding this little baby, and when she's finished feeding, she goes, oh, you're so gorgeous, I could just eat you all up. All right? That's oxytocin. The other way we release oxytocin is meaningful connection, and particularly meaningful physical connection. So I love the mornings I get to sleep in because I have a cuddle with Neroli and I get heaps of oxytocin. And the control part of the brain for the emotional brain, the reactive part of the brain, oxytocin calms that down. That's why when you often get upset with somebody and it all calms down, you want to give them a hug because you actually want to release oxytocin. I said my next dog's going to be named Oxytocin too, okay? All right. Vasopressin is the monogamy drug. So it's not only do I want to cuddle, but I only want to cuddle you. Now, you can't get to the good drugs until you get past the fast-acting stuff. So what happens in normal relationships, fast-acting stuff, it fades. Did I marry the right person? Am I in the right relationship? All those sort of normal things that happen. And then we start to grow. And that's why, this is really interesting, seniors have the best and most active sex life in Australia more than teenagers. Isn't that cool? There's a few seniors blushing around here. Now, why they blush, I'm going to talk to you guys here for a moment. That means your grandparents are doing it. But here's the really good news. That's what God intended. And when you get to their age, you'll be thanking God for it too, okay? Now, the reason it happens like that is because it's gone from this is all about my needs and my gratification and you looking hot to actually we have meaningful connection because we've spent a lifetime getting to know each other. And so they're producing a lot more oxytocin and vasopressin because just by enduring the time of marriage. That is wonderful news. So respect is so important to healthy relationship and particularly healthy sexual relationship in marriage. But porn doesn't teach us anything about that. Porn just wants to rip us off. The next slide is a quick video clip on the science of porn addiction.
Sexual tastes vary from person to person, but with the current pornography epidemic, as some call it, one has to wonder how exactly this may affect our desires and perception of sexuality. Moreover, how does it affect our sex lives? Pornography constitutes about 25% of all search engine requests and is the fourth most common reason people give for going on the internet. And while it may seem to simply facilitate an instinctual sexual response linked to millions of years of evolution, the truth is pornography has dynamically changed over time, ultimately molding our tastes and desires. The not-so-shocking truth is that pornography has profound consequences for the brain and acts in many ways like a drug. With prolonged exposure, your tolerance is increased, and many often find themselves addicted. Though it's not a physical substance, it leads to the same general loss of control, the compulsiveness to seek out the activity despite negative consequences, and withdrawal when it goes away, much like that of gambling or running, for example. The issue is that continued exposure can cause long-term or even lifelong neuroplastic change in the brain. Dopamine is released as a reward whenever we accomplish something, whether it be eating to sustain life or sexual activity to produce future life. And this dopamine consolidates neural connections in order to drive us to perform the same activity in the future. In other words, it alters and forms the brain cells to motivate certain actions. It rewires your brain. The National Institutes of Health measure drug addictiveness by testing rats. The rat is trained to press a button in order to get a drug, and the harder it works indicates how addictive the substance is. It turns out that the more addictive a drug is, the more dopamine we see released. And while there is, unfortunately, no rat porn that we can give to them, we do know that dopamine is also released during sexual excitement, which pornography plays right into. The more time you spend doing it, the more dopamine gets released, which reinforces the behavior and makes you not only desire it in the future, but require it. And as you begin to imagine these images away from the computer or while having sex, they become reinforced. Furthermore, each orgasm releases even more dopamine, which consolidates the connections made during the session. It's a feedback loop that becomes harder to escape. And just like a drug, your tolerance for visual stimulation has now compounded, making it more difficult to be turned on by reality. Pornography addiction can often lead to finding your mate less attractive. The good news is, it doesn't have to be permanent. Usually when people understand the mechanism and realize it's affecting their relationships, they can stop. The brain is often described as a use it or lose it system because the neural connections you stimulate grow stronger and desire to be activated, while the ones you ignore become weakened. Much like your muscles, which, if sitting still all day, itch for activity, but after prolonged non-use, they become complacent. Luckily, because of this use it or lose it brain, the same neuroplastic system that proliferates these habits can also be used to acquire healthier ones. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe for more weekly science videos.
How does this relate to marriage? It's interesting that pre the proliferation of internet through technology is that in divorce records is that porn addiction hardly ever appeared. Whereas if we read up there in 2004 testimony before the United States Senate, Dr. Jill Manning shared some interesting data regarding pornography and relationships. In her research, she found 56% of divorce cases involve one party having an obsessive interest with pornography websites. And I was just reading a new research last night that hasn't been peer reviewed yet, but porn users increase their divorce rate by double. Why? Because what happens is that addiction in the brain is teaching me hand-to-keyboard response, not relational responses. Because a relationship response is person to person. And pornography objectifies people, and it's all about pleasure, and that's it. Getting off, that's all it's about. And in my work with sex addicts, I've not met someone struggling with porn addiction or sex addiction yet who actually chose that pathway. They got exposed to porn at a young age, an age before their brain could even understand those adult concepts. They got hit with these big chemical stuff, and then what happens is they just get hooked into it and they go, this is not right, but I can't stop it. And it's not like anyone puts their hand up and say, I'm going to choose to be a porn addict. And we actually have a pandemic in our culture because it's become so infiltrated into popular culture that old school values of modesty don't seem to be even talked about, or if you do that, somehow you're a radical right-wing lunatic, rather than actually someone who wants to respect people and value people. The good news is there's a way through recovery from porn. It's not easy, it's hard work. Most guys who end up in my practice now, there are women who get addicted to porn as well, and I've got a couple of colleagues who have worked with them, but for me I work mostly with men, most often Christian men, and the reason they come is because their marriage is in crisis. But to actually get on top of porn addiction is a good 8 to 12 months hard work. It's not as simple as saying just pray about it or hand it over to God. We're actually dealing with really profound wiring of the brain and brain chemicals that make it very hard to break. So it's not a simple answer. It is a hard road, but it's doable. And it's very interesting looking at the difference of generations, because my generation, their first exposure to pornography was print media, and they actually get through it quicker than the younger generation, because the younger generation have been impacted by technology, porn, and that actually we don't fully understand yet, but we know there's a difference of what it does to the brain. So there's hard work. What's really exciting is that there's a worldwide movement now talking about pornography as a health issue and a child protection issue. If no one in Australia is supposed to access porn under the age of 18, how come by 15 or 16 every one of our adolescents mostly have seen it? Isn't that contradictory against our laws? So now what we're doing is we're not fighting it on the grounds of morality, we're fighting it on the grounds of this is a health issue. It actually has consequences with sexual health, diseases, relationships, identity, mental health. But then we're also saying this is a child protection issue. And there's a couple of organisations that are doing a great job. Now, one of the organisations, Fight the New Drug, they had a group of guys get together, not Christians, just people who've been impacted by porn, and said, if porn is using brain science and technology to hook us in, can we use brain science and technology to bring healing? And they produced a program called Fortify Program. The next clip I'm going to show you is just a promo clip from Fortify, but anytime I talk about pornography, I always show this clip because this is a great resource.
Welcome to the Fortify program. We're glad you're here. Fortify is a web-based program developed by professionals that uses the brain science behind pornography addiction to help you find your path to freedom. Through a series of more than 50 dynamic videos, we'll dive into how and why addiction happens, show you how to break out of the addiction cycle, and explore strategies to get to the root of the problem to achieve long-lasting freedom. All along the way, you'll be developing your own battle strategies, customized to your personal needs and challenges. That'll become your step-by-step guide to regaining control of your life for good. You'll also have access to your very own battle tracker, which will help you visualize your improvements. You see, after receiving thousands of emails from struggling teens, we were determined to create a program that was accessible to young people at no cost. In order to do that, we have also created an adult version of the Fortify program to meet the needs of young adults and not so young adults. Thanks to their sponsorships, we are able to offer the Fortify program for free to anyone 20 years old and younger. It's a win-win. Adults can give back and help a struggling teen go through the program for free while still getting the help that they need. Whether you're a teen or an adult, or someone who works with individuals dealing with this issue, we're glad you're here. Sign up now and let's fight this together.
Now, I always show the Fortify clip because I always say to people,
Welcome to the Fortify.
You might know somebody who might need this, all right? From a Christian perspective, I want to give you one passage. Now, nearly everybody in this room would know John 3:16. I wonder how many know the very next verse, 17. And that's the passage I want to give you, but I'm going to give it to you in Eugene Peterson's translation, The Message. And this is the words of Jesus. The Father didn't go to all the trouble of sending his only Son in the world to point an accusing finger to tell the world how bad you are. He came to put things right. The hope is we can heal and we can be transformed. It's not easy, but that's the work of Jesus, putting things right. If you want to follow up some resources, I'll go back. Fight the New Drug. Their motto is porn kills love. Choose love, not porn. And they're the ones who run the Fortify program, but they put out a newsletter. You can subscribe to the newsletter and get great information. And you'll be surprised, most of the drivers behind Fight the New Drug, a lot of people in their 20s in this organisation. Not old crinklies like me. A lot of young people. Porn Harms Kids is a symposium that started 2 years ago, and my colleague Liz Walker is the chair for it. It's not a Christian organisation, but there are a lot of Christians involved. But we actually had a symposium looking at all the research data so that we can say to the government, this is a health issue, this is a child protection issue, and this is the Australian one that is acting as a lobby group. But you go to their webpage, you can sign up for the newsletter, put your name down there and say, I'm actually with these guys saying the government needs to address, because pornography harms kids. Pornography harms people. Pornography harms relationships. I want to finish with reading the passage that Donna read, but I want to read it to you from the Message in light of what we've been talking about. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you, take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognise what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you, develops well-formed maturity in you. As J.B. Phillips said, don't let the culture of this world squeeze you into its mould. Pornography is rampant. We have a challenge to protect ourselves, our relationships, our kids, and our society. And I'm sure there's different responses for different people today. For some, it's gone, ouch, that's a bit close to the bone for me. For others, it might be, how do I protect my children from this insidious evil? For others, it might be, how do I protect my marriage? Or even someone might be, what can I do to protect our society, our country? As I pray, the music team's going to come back up, so let me pray for us. Father God, it's not an easy topic or a pleasant topic to talk about, but it is an important topic because the father of lies has taken something that is very evil and made it socially acceptable. And I know that there are people here who have been caught up in it. And I know that for some, Lord, their heartbeat is for you, that cries out for you, only you, Lord, but yet this struggle in the shadows keeps tripping me up. For those, Lord, I want to pray that you will open the pathway for healing, that you would give them hope, healing and transformation. There's others of us, Lord, that we're concerned about our loved ones. And I want to join with them and pray that you will surround our kids particularly as a shield and protect them. Protect their eye gate. Help us to teach them how to respond really well so that they can choose respect above all. For our families, for this church family, for our nation, Lord, I pray for your grace. I ask for your mercy as we battle this incredible, insidious evil. And that in tangible ways, in individual lives and as a national life, we will see your victory working out. Pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen.